ports and waterways and shipping, and to ORF, and Samir in particular, for this amazing initiative. We, as Europeans, we have really considered this part of the world as a strategic partners. We're totally committed to work together. We have amazing common interests. This is one of the good news of the dark times we live in. I looked at the figure, it's mind-boggling. Europe is the main investor in South Pacific. 90% of our trade goes via maritime routes. We are the biggest trading partners, and we share common values in terms of, as the minister was saying, economy and ecology has to go together. In this amazing mutual benefit scenario, there are also big challenges. Let me give you a small example. I'm running a small hotel in Italy, and suddenly 2021, 2022, during COVID, we couldn't find, and you know, for us Italians, tourism is like 20% of our economy. Suddenly, we didn't have delivery of slipperies or bathrobes for the hotel. And it was like one container ship blocked in one port in Asia, another port in Asia maybe closed. We realized at the micro level how integrated we are, how interdependent we are. And I think the whole issue of resilience, of access, of free maritime routes, of fluid supply chains has really come up, at least for us Europeans, at the forefront of our concerns. On top of it, we also have the issue of security. Many of the shipping companies, as you know, are now choosing to go all the way around Africa, between the Indo-Pacific and Europe, because of the geopolitical situation, the insecurity situation in the Suez Canal and the piracy. We also have their common operation with India and Europe and the United States to ensure free and safe maritime traffic. And the other last challenge I would like to mention, from my point of view, free trade is not be given for granted anymore. From 20th of January, we will all wake up with a world where the United States is going to talk about tariffs and quotas, and we are not sure that the rule-based free trade in respect of international institutions, in respect of WTO, is going to be the new normal. Might be different. All of this brings me to introduce this amazing panel of experts and policymakers that are really on a daily basis working on how sea lines and the land lines, fast lines, are interconnected. How do we go from ships to railways to highways to improve our trade via maritime routes? And technology, robotization, digitalization, automatization is doing revolutionary changes in the way the whole logistics is handled, and I really look forward to learn more. So I would like to introduce with great pleasure Abla Abdel Latif. You are the Executive Director of the Egyptian Economic Research Center and also the Director of Research. Welcome. Marco Dreosto, Italian, Senator from an area that has very important ports in Italy. Rizwan Sumar, and I apologize if my pronunciation of a wonderful, beautiful Indian name is not so good. You are the CEO of DP World. Thank you also for supporting this event. And Bart de Jong, last but not least, you are a senior advisor of the Dutch Minister of Maritime Affairs. Abdel, I would like to start with you. You are in a very sensitive areas, the Suez Canal, and you are a top economist. So how will this economic integration be impacted by the infra corridors, and what in general do you think about the issue of bus lanes and connectivity?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'd like to start by thanking the Ministry for the invitation and thank my good friend Samir Saran. Congratulate them on the initiative, okay, which is, I think, one of the first ways of walking the talk of the oceans, and on involving the youth in the initiative as well. And when they said that ORF has a challenge, I was happy. I knew they're going to make the challenge and meet it, because this is what they always does. Samir, I don't know if he's here or not, but it's good to know. As an economist, let me talk a bit generally. As an economist, all those corridors, the maritime corridors and the infrastructure corridors, all of them actually, they are supporting and pushing for economic integration. And what I want to mention in those few initial messages is how to maximize this economic integration, how to maximize the economic benefit of having them. And I want to talk about three specific things. First one is related to the environment. We all know the importance of preserving the environment. We all know that the ocean is a gift from God that we have to keep, etc., etc. But it's all rhetoric. The action is very little. And we see it in all the discussions about the climate. How to go about it is not talked about enough. I think it is essential that the environmental sustainability policies need to be integrated into the trade policies, not talked about as an after effect. It's not that the ships throw their waste and then we clean the waste. Okay, we use bad fuel and then we clean afterwards. It needs to be integrated from the beginning if we are really to preserve the environment. My second point is related to AI. Artificial intelligence is becoming, of course, a huge subject that has influenced the entire world. It is going to change completely the maritime logistics. Is going to make it more efficient, and more efficiency means more trade, more competitiveness, better prosperity, which is what we are all after. There is a need to have a stronger infrastructure. There is a need to finance this. There is a lot of need for partnership between public and private sector, and a lot of involvement by different countries, because it's for the interest of everybody. And I think it would be great if this conference is done on a yearly basis, and there is a regular follow-up on how those things are advancing. Those two, what happened during the year, to say we moved on the how question more. My third and last point, very briefly, is we need to capitalize on the existing maritime corridors. And a good example is the Suez Canal Economic Zone. It is planning to be, already is, and planning to be more of an international investment hub, capitalizing on the logistic hub of the Suez Canal. It's 455 square kilometers, okay, but it has 6 ports, it has 4 industrial zones, and it's operating with a very respectable model that has the ecosystem, the positioning in terms of cost, in terms of rules, in terms of regulations, and in terms of focus on green.
Thank you very much, Adel, for this very interesting presentation. And I now move to Senator Marco Drosto. You are coming from an area where there is a very interesting port as a gateway to Northern Europe. It's and the Eastern Balkans is Trieste in Italy. And I would like you to tell us a little more about the corridors, and in particular IMEC. How is the whole thing is reshaping the relationship between the Pacific, Indian, and Europe? Well, I will translate myself, since I'm Italian. Allora Marco, quello che abbiamo detto prima praticamente, certo, la questione dei corridoi, di IMEC, di Trieste, e come questi cambiamenti delle parti terrestri possono influenzare tutto il commercio con il Pacifico.
Thank you, Anna Maria, for your question. Before, let me say that it's a privilege for me to be here today in Delhi, and in particular to discuss about this important topic. Now I speak in Italian and Marco translate for me. Ti ringrazio per la domanda, perché il momento storico implica scelte importanti. Noi siamo un paese, io sono un senatore italiano, che ha una situazione geografica, strategica, importantissima, che è quella di essere al centro del Mediterraneo, un paese che ha visto nella sua storia, nel suo passato, anche attraverso i famosi romani che sono arrivati poi fino in India, abbiamo anche scoperto le monete indiane qui in India, necessita oggi di opportunità che possono essere proprio intraprese attraverso queste iniziative, come quella di cui tu hai parlato, il corridoio IMEC, uno strumento che faciliterà non solo la vicinanza tra posti lontani nel mondo, ma soprattutto relazioni, attività di commercio ed opportunità. Questa posizione geopolitica e strategica anche dal punto geografico vede poi in particolare un territorio che è quello da cui provengo, il Friuli Venezia Giulia, ancora più incentrato su questi obiettivi, dove il porto di Trieste, proprio per la sua posizione strategica al nord-est dell'Italia, ma soprattutto vicino, come tu hai detto, ai Balcani, vicino al nord Europa e vicino all'est Europa, può essere davvero il punto terminale o iniziale, da un altro punto di vista, di un corridoio di collaborazione tra il Mediterraneo e l'Indo-Pacifico strategico per un futuro di successi per questi popoli.
So I will translate. We are living in a very difficult situation, in a difficult moment, and we are obliged to take an important choice. Italy, for example, has a very under a geographical point of view, has a very strategic position. It's at the center of the Mediterranean. The relationship between Italy and India, for example, is the fact that some archaeologists also found some coins, ancient Roman coins in India, is the proof that we were already connected. But now, like project like IMEC will facilitate the connection between our two different areas, not only about the friendship, but also the business and the commerce. In particular, there is the Friuli Venezia Giulia region that is in northeast of Italy, that has the port of Trieste. Port of Trieste that is in the north of Italy, but overall is at the center of Europe. It has a big connection with the north and the central Europe, and this is even more a strategic point of view for Italy and for IMEC corridor.
Thank you very much, Marco. And I now move to Rizwan Sumar. You are probably the one who has most knowledge on port handling and very concrete examples to give us on how this in practice this revolution is landing in practice. What changes do we need in the policies and the procedures, and what are the development logistic managements made to use the potential of the corridors, and how are the specialized supply chains capability can be built up? I mean, you are the one who can answer to all these questions.
Thank you very much. So I'll just give an example of a subset of the corridor. So the IMEC corridor is a pretty large in terms of, it spans across so many countries. And there's a lot of infrastructure that one needs to still build in terms of rail connections, in terms of border controls, processes, et cetera, et cetera. But let me just give you one example of a subset of the IMEC corridor, which is the India-UAE corridor in that sense. And they're both great partners of each other in terms of trade, right, for example. And that derived demand is already there for logistics to be an enabler, essentially. So if you look at the India-UAE logistics corridor as a subset of the IMEC corridor, there is infrastructure on both sides. On the India side, there is Bharatmala, there is SAGARMANTHAN and such initiatives. $200 billion projects, promises to actually, reduce the logistics cost by almost $5–6 billion, which are actually being delivered as we speak, because the infrastructure is coming up as we speak. There are free zones in India. The port network is extremely efficient and world-class. You have India-UAE connectivity in terms of shipping, which is actually very effective. There's enough shipping space. between the two countries to support the trade. And then on the UAE side, you have Jebel Ali Free Zone, which is one of the largest free zones globally in that sense, 58 square kilometers big, housing almost 8,000 companies, most of them Fortune 500 companies, quite a few of them Fortune 500 companies, you know, contributing to almost 1/3 the GDP of Dubai. You have a port which is actually again world-class, you know, handling 15 million containers, both in terms of gateway as well as transshipment goods. You know, 30% of that 15 million is actually gateway cargo, which is essentially cargo that is produced, value added within the UAE in that sense. And so this corridor is an example of how we can actually replicate, scale this to other parts of the corridor to actually create a seamless end-to-end IMEC corridor as an example. And then of course, you know, there are processes and there are systems that we need to actually put in place. One such example is the virtual trade corridor concept that the two countries actually inaugurated not many months back, which essentially brings the port community systems of both the countries literally on one page, on one platform, including the customs at both ends. So what happens with this is that if the cargo is, for example, cleared in one country, it is actually seamless in terms of clearance in the other country, simply because the information is real time, it is actually shared freely, and this actually ensures that the clearance time actually comes down dramatically. You know, everybody has access to information, that is the people who are actually associated with the supply chain, and according to shared protocols have actually access to this information when they need to. So this really creates a very transparent, trust-based system that actually enables trade to actually flow. And during my keynote, I actually also mentioned about currency and, you know, the settlement scheme between traders becoming actually more real-time, you know, not to be actually dependent on the one currency that most trade is actually dependent on, one system that most trade is dependent on, which actually creates a lot of restrictions on the trading community in terms of who you can trade with, how you can trade with, when you can trade with, et cetera, et cetera. So a blockchain platform is something that I envisage, you know, and in many conferences and in many public speaking events like this, I shared this as one of those initiatives that governments need to actually to promote and propagate, so that, you know, we actually enable trade to happen for the benefit of the economies of the countries involved in that sense. So the virtual trade corridor is one such enabler for free trade to happen. And we all know CEPA. That was actually a landmark free trade agreement that was actually signed a couple of years back, and just 1 year alone, the trade went up by 16%, right? Which is actually testament to the fact that these free trade agreements actually promote trade per se. And then of course, this is just a start, because there's a lot of information that comes in from traders and importers and exporters every day in terms of how goods can actually be further opened up between the two countries. So this is just one such example of a subset of the IMEC corridor, which could be inspirational for the rest of the corridor or rest of the subsets of the corridor to follow. And everybody, if they actually work as subsets, then the entire IMEC corridor will become a reality at one point. The other initiatives that I could actually, you know, quickly share with you is something called as Bharat Mart, right? Which we actually, which the Honorable Prime Minister of India inaugurated a year back in Dubai. This is nothing but a platform where one could retail their goods. Indian traders could retail their goods in Dubai. They could actually showcase their goods in terms of, they could be carpets, they could be handicraft manufacturers, et cetera, who get this opportunity to showcase their goods. And they could also have warehousing, you know, associated in the same complex where they could actually store their goods. There's logistics facilities that are actually available. And the reason for this is simple, right? That, you know, people from all over Middle East and Africa, they come to Dubai because Dubai is one of the most connected cities in the world. So it's very easy to travel to Dubai and to actually trade. And it's actually a trading hub for many, many years. So when they come to Dubai, they touch and feel the goods. You know, they want half a container of handicrafts, 1 container of carpets, et cetera, et cetera. So they get a chance to touch and feel these goods. And this gives the opportunity for Indian traders to further showcase their markets, their goods to the new markets, and this is one of the enablers to do so in that sense. So this is just another example of you know, how do we leverage logistics infrastructure to create more trade, and for our SMEs and MSMEs in India and other parts of the world to actually realize new markets and actually realize a better price for their products. So this is just a couple of examples I thought I'll just share.
Thank you so much, Rizwan. It's really impressive, and that leads me to move to or here, Ratish. You are the Joint Secretary on Development Partnership at the Foreign Ministry of India. And let's talk about maritime diplomacy. Let's talk about how this mind-boggling magnitude, undescribable, and also the Indian Minister of Maritime was talking about in terms of what India is achieving and is planning to achieve from here to 2047. It's so impressive. Are the policies, the procedures, the diplomatic environment catching up? I mean, we need global standards, we need conventions, we need to respect the WHO, we need to stop copycatting and stealing technology, and just to make provocative examples, is diplomacy catching up with technology?
Thank you, ma'am. So I'd just like to take one step back to try and frame the Indian perspective. Much of it has already been delved into by the ministers and the other panelists who the audience heard before. So India is coming from a very rich tradition of maritime trade and contact. I think that spans about 3 to 4 millennia. Somewhere in the past few hundred years, I think we lost a bit of that agency to shape that narrative and the terms and the conditions and the context of those maritime contacts and the trade and the economic linkages that we had built over millennia. I think what we are seeing now with all the initiatives that are being rolled out by the government is an attempt to take back some of that agency and see what we can do with it for undergirding the common good, the greater good of society at large, the way we see it. I think we have spoken about the SAGARMALA project, which has been on since 2015, which not only involves the modernization of ports, but also connecting them to the hinterland and integrating the economies within India itself, but also the build out of coastal economic zones, overlaying these architectures with digital systems and improving logistics, reducing logistics costs. The national logistics policy speaks to this from 2022 onwards, and also some of the digital build outs we have seen in the logistics space, like the National Logistics Portal, ULIP, etc., etc. So coupled with these initiatives on infrastructure build outs as well as improvement of logistics, we've also rolled out some efforts in the manufacturing side, whether these are production incentives, etc., to try and gin up some of our manufacturing sectors, particularly electronics, pharma, etc., to try and tie into the logistics and the infrastructure build outs. Now, I think the time has also come for us to integrate some of these ideas and concepts and efforts with our near neighborhood, our neighborhood first policy, as well as our Act East initiatives towards ASEAN. Now, ASEAN is a very well integrated region. They have a single window system, they have multiple agreements on customs and tariffs and transport. What South Asia needs, I think we find it in ASEAN. And some of our connectivity efforts towards the east, be it the trilateral highway, the India-Myanmar Thailand trilateral highway, and other initiatives, the Sitwe port, etc., are coming from that context. I think similarly we have also worked on the Chabahar port to the west and are now speaking about the IMEC corridor. So you will find an expression of India's maritime thinking in some of these corridors and its efforts in this region. These are also expressed in some of the grid connectivity projects we've had ongoing with Nepal, with Bhutan, with Bangladesh, etc. The idea is to integrate South Asia and the Indian subcontinent with eastward as well as westward through these corridors, through these maritime projects, etc., to sort of try and elevate our own position, align our own development policies with this effort, and also I think one important thing that comes to mind is the context that we are all operating in, the challenging global environment. So there is an undercurrent of de-risking and diversification that is also animating the minds of our policymakers while we attempt this. The other challenge, of course, is a certain level of anxiety and distrust in the digital build-outs that go along with this. So trying to surmount these challenges while we integrate ourselves with our extended neighborhood is essentially the essence of what the government is thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohit. And now, last but not least, Bart de Jong. You're a Dutch diplomat and now senior advisor to the Minister of Maritime Affairs. Of course, Rotterdam is one of the biggest ports in the world. It has a partnership with many ports also in the Asian Pacific area, not the least Singapore, on a smart port solution that have reduced emissions of 20% and help modernizing the ports. You know a lot about the issue of corridors. Can you tell us more?
The corridors. Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you, Aurore, for having me on the panel and us participating in this very important conference. If you talk about corridor development and how that impacts economies, I think we in the Netherlands, but also in the EU, are convinced that corridor development will promote economic integration. The EU for now 25 or 30 years has this program of trans-European networks, and it has proven to be a catalyst for economic development, especially in regions that were not so much connected to the European heartland. Rotterdam, of course, is an example. We are at the mouth of the River Rhine, very well connected to the hinterland. The success of Rotterdam is not so much its location only, yes, that's important, but it's also the hinterland connections, the integrated hinterland connections, multi-modal hinterland connections. So we have inland waterways, we have rail, we have road, and you need to continuously invest in that. And IMEC has been mentioned a few times. I think that a well thought through corridor development, India, Middle East, Europe, would be very beneficial for economic integration in this region, absolutely, yeah. But then, the infrastructure is one. What you also need is a unified legal framework. Of course, you need standardization of rules on safety, on environment, on documentation. All these kinds of things are being thought through in basically UN organizations. We have the IMO, we have the ILO for labor standards, by the way. We have UNCITRAL, all these UN bodies that work on a uniform global system of rules. And then that's basically not all, because you may have good infrastructure, you may have good rules, but I think that Rizan just pointed at the fact that you also need to have efficient handling of cargo imports. And that is where IT systems, port community systems come into play. So you also would need to invest in that. Coming back to your first remark, yes, the Port of Rotterdam has a number of cooperations with big ports in the world, with Singapore, but also port in Brazil, with Sohar in Oman. Dubai, I don't know actually, but probably yes. They wouldn't skip Dubai, I guess, but anyway. No, but the thing is that that cooperation very much looks at how can we make these kinds of relations more efficient. That basically is then the IT systems and the alignment of port community systems.
Thank you so much, Bert. I will soon open the floor. Please prepare your questions. Be ready to introduce yourself. Be very short. Questions, not comments. Just first, a last quick round. How do we connect all these dots? We have seen all the benefits. We have seen all the challenges. Abel, I'll start again. Abla. You mentioned challenge of security, sustainability, and the economic, all together with economic zone. Zoom in, please, in the very important issues that you have been raising.
Okay, let me zoom in on the security issue, which is a concern for everybody, and specifically on the Houthis issues and the fact that the ships will not pass through the Suez Canal and instead go through the Cape of Good Hope, and this actually brought down our revenues from the Suez Canal for a while. Okay, but I want to mention a few very specific points. Number one, the Suez Canal as such has always been a safe channel. It does not have any history of security problems in the passing of ships. That's one. Two, it will remain, okay, a major channel in bulk trade. Okay? The reason I'm saying this is because we need to step back a little bit when we look at the security issue. When we look at risk in general of anything, risk is two kinds. There is risk that is of a temporary nature, okay, and there is risk of a permanent nature. What happened during the last period and affected everybody is of a temporary nature because it is affected, it is coming from a very, very clear source that's obvious to everyone, and that is actually the Israel-Palestine war. Okay? And so the solution does not lie in the Suez Canal or in the ocean, it actually lies in restoring the security in the Middle East. This is the core of the problem, and it has to be seen this way. Not seeing it this way, and instead going for huge investments in new corridors as if the Suez Canal is going to stop operating, I think is wrong and not fair for the world. From an economic perspective, it's like doing a dead weight loss, which is putting lots of investments that will not be needed. This does not mean that the corridors, the new ones, should not be there, okay, and actually Egypt is going to have one of its own called the Golden Bridge, but it means that it has to be looked at as complementary to the main roads that already, the main corridors that already exist, because the new ones are capitalizing on the maritime, adding the railways and the networks of roads and so on. It's very important to see it this way. Seeing it otherwise would not be correct. The same, by the way, applies to what you were saying on the 20th of January, there's going to be tariffs and there will be no free trade. It's the same issue. The core of the problem that we need a change in the entire economic system where the division of power is corrected and the South takes its position. We need a new Bretton Woods, we need new rules, okay, so that everybody can speak and not only the big.
And that, thank you very much, Abla, and that of course applies to many of the planned corridors. And I would like to ask Marco again on the issue of IMEC, which is of course connecting India to the Middle East, again through Europe. Do you think it is the potential to develop in the way it was planned, and how do you see it developing? Allora, IMEC di nuovo. Lei parlava dei problemi geopolitici, il conflitto nel Medio Oriente, tu vedi le possibilità di IMEC di svilupparsi nel modo in cui era previsto? Cioè...
Sì, grazie. Permettimi innanzitutto di ringraziare il nostro ambasciatore qui a Delhi, l'ambasciatore Antonio Bartoli, che ha da poco preso questo importante incarico, col quale mi sono incontrato questa mattina proprio per avere un aggiornamento. E la cosa interessante è che l'Italia, e questo ci tenevo a dirlo, e l'India stanno sviluppando un importante protocollo con diversi punti che porteranno sicuramente obiettivi importanti per i nostri paesi. E questo è un punto di partenza che va anche oltre il corridoio image. Detto questo, penso che la fase geopolitica e storica che stiamo attraversando, con un conflitto in Medio Oriente, quindi proprio nel Mediterraneo, e un conflitto ai confini dell'Europa con l'Ucraina, sicuramente sta ritardando in questo momento alcune importanti decisioni che porteranno evidentemente poi agli sviluppi di cui abbiamo parlato. Però dobbiamo essere fiduciosi e soprattutto auspicare e anche come parti politiche attivarci affinché la diplomazia possa fare il suo corso e possa riportare al più presto il termine dei conflitti per la ripartenza poi di questi paesi, ma di tutti i territori. Volevo concludere solo facendo una riflessione sempre sul corridoio image, provenendo, come dicevo prima, dalla Friuli Venezia Giulia e da Trieste, come da qui partì, ci tengo a sottolinearlo, il barone Revoltella, che fu uno dei più grandi ideatori, finanziatori e realizzatori del famoso canale di Suez, e l'auspicio che abbiamo, considerato proprio che il nostro territorio è un territorio che ha una forte vocazione al mare, una forte vocazione al commercio, una forte vocazione alle infrastrutture, da quell'iniziativa possa oggi ripartire attraverso l'image una nuova opportunità che riveda quei fasti e riporti, come dicevo, ai nostri paesi quel benessere e quella anche solidarietà che è necessaria per uno sviluppo comune.
Grazie Marco, thank you very much. Rizvan, you raised extremely...
I think that I have to
scusami.
translate.
Vai.
Congratulations.
Stavo guardando l'orologio, vai.
First of all, I would like to thank also the Italian ambassador in India, Ambassador Bartoli. We had a very useful lunch today, and I got updated on the relationship between Italy and India. And it's important that our two countries are boosting the cooperation with a memorandum of understanding, also many other many topics. The world we are living right now, it's very complicated. There are many geopolitical challenges. Russia-Ukraine war, Middle East are slowing down probably the IMEC project. But it's up to the political system and it's up to the diplomacy trying to restore the peace in order also to develop IMEC project. And I would like also to finish, to conclude my interventions, reminding that I'm from Friuli Venezia Giulia, the region where there is Trieste, and there was one guy from Trieste, Barone Revoltella, who was one of the main financiers of the Suez Canal. And making the comparison of that time, we hope that our territory that has always been very vocal towards the sea, towards the business, the commerce, will rethink and we re-establish that very good time where we were looking also at East. And via IMEC, this could be a very good opportunity to restore wealth and the relationship between our countries and the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rizvan, very quickly, what is your vision on connectivity? What is your key message out of your knowledge and experience and day-to-day operation?
Yeah. Thanks. So it's not just about global corridors, global value chains. It's also about connecting, a country, internally in that sense. So if you look at the DMIC in India, which is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, it is contributing to almost 43% of India's GDP in terms of the economic activity that actually happens along this corridor. And now you have the dedicated freight corridor between the north and the west of India, which will actually further spur economic activity undoubtedly, because it will bring the cost of logistics down. It will actually make sure that economic activity is actually around it, which can actually make use of the logistics enabler of connectivity, and so on and so forth. And then if you look at the globe, I mean, Africa needs to be connected to Africa. I mean, there are so many countries in Africa that need to be connected with each other in that sense. I mean, why should Africa only depend on other countries when there is economic activity that can be spurred by demand within Africa in that sense? And I gave that statistic that there's only 4% of the global trade contributed by African ports, whereas 14% of the population essentially global population resides in Africa. So there is a lot of untapped potential out there in terms of connectivity. So it's not just about the IMEC corridor, it's not just about the INSTC corridor. I mean, there are 10, 15 global corridors that will actually create a lot of economic activity if the countries actually collaborate and make them happen. But within countries as well, we can actually make domestic value chains happen by actually having more and more corridors that actually get the impetus for further economic activity. So that would be the message. It's not just about one or two corridors. It's about multiple corridors linking global value chains, and it's about multiple corridors ensuring that domestic trade happens, domestic consumption actually gets fulfilled within the country by creating logistics as an enabler where connectivity is concerned.
Thank you very much. Bart, now I take you, same question. What do you think out of your knowledge and experience is the key way to leverage the benefits of the new connectivity?
Well, the key element, I mean, I mentioned three in my previous intervention. I said, well, you need infrastructure corridors, sound, well connected. You need legislation in place, uniform legislation globally. You need to have even these labor standards. We talked about these port community systems, but trade is not happening if countries do not cooperate with each other. And what we need to have, what is crucial, I think, in leveraging this economic potential is free trade. The European Union, as an example, we've had a uniform internal market since 1992. There's many new member states, the Netherlands and 6 others were the founding fathers of the EU, but many new member states grew immensely after the creation of the common market in 1992. So I think free trade in international relations is paramount to getting all this going. And if I may, I want to call upon India also to have a perspective from that point of view on the negotiations with the EU.
So that brings me to thank you, Bart. That brings me to Rohit. What about the negotiation with the EU on this very important issue of connectivity?
Sorry, can you come again?
I would like to rebound to you what Bart has been mentioning about EU-Indian relationships on the issue of connectivity and fast lines and sea lines.
Sure.
You get the concluding remarks.
Sure, thanks.
Very quickly, please.
Yeah. I think it's a very important relationship from an Indian perspective for sure. The negotiations are ongoing, so obviously we cannot comment on that. But I think given our own challenges within India, challenges of sustainable development, challenges of economics, challenges of employment, challenges of generating growth for the next 2 to 3 decades, and the geopolitical environment that all of us face, not just India. I mean, the risks that come from conflict, the risks that come from health crises, etc., fragmentation of the world. I think the India-EU relationship hopefully is one of stability, of mutual benefit, and we hope that connectivity and trade and sustainability become a very, very key pillar of this relationship. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now I open to the audience. I am sure there will be many interesting questions. Please introduce yourself. Let's see, down there first with a pen. Yes. Then you, and then you. I cannot really see you. Yes, please. Do you get a mic somewhere?
Yes, good evening, panelists. My name is Harikesh and I'm preparing for IS. So it's great pleasure to hear such a distinguished panel. Sir, my question is to Rijwan sir, CEO of DP World. Sir, you have been emphasizing on connectivity projects across the regions and highlighting these many of the corridors that recently have been being promoted by the governments. But sir, there are various risks to these connectivity projects like Red Sea blockage by the Houthis and partial opening of the Black Sea by the Russia. So, sir, also on the contrary, there are response by the US-led military alliance in the form of Operation Prosperity Guardians, but even they are not able to secure the freedom of navigations and security of these connectivity projects. So, can you highlight on some of the ways where the connectivity projects can be secured by the international community, including UNSC, and what further needs to be done by the international community to secure these freedom of navigations and free and inclusive Indo-Pacific especially? Thank you.
Can I? It's to me, right?
Rizwan, want to answer?
So I think the question, if I understood you right, sir, was about that there are a lot of impediments to actually connectivity. I mean, there's a lot of issues, which kind of hamper connectivity, in these corridors. And I think some of the points that you actually mentioned, about geopolitical risk that actually exists today, but there are more geopolitical risks that may actually come in tomorrow, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the established legacy corridors per se, and therefore the need to actually have alternate corridors. And as I actually mentioned, that cannot be just 1 or 2 or 3 alternate corridors. There have to be many that have to be actually explored, that have to be worked on, and that have to be actually collaborated between the various countries that are actually involved. And this is not just about the government sector that actually has to do this, but it also has to be enabled by the private sector. For example, logistics facilities can actually come around along this corridor, you know, unfettered almost, right? I mean, we have actually put up several such facilities in terms of free zones, in terms of, you know, rail container depots, ports. I mean, these are essentially private facilities that have actually come up, you know, with government concessions in some cases. And so therefore, we have to actually, you know, see ahead in terms of some of these corridors that need to be prioritized, based on the geopolitical risk that actually exist. And then actually, nothing is stopping the private sector to also come forth and actually develop these corridors and make this enablement actually happen. Of course, countries need to collaborate, policies need to be put in place, border processes need to be actually streamlined. You know, for example, rail gauges need to be made uniform, otherwise you have actually interchanges which actually create a lot of inefficiency as such. So some of these impediments also have to be highlighted by you and I to ensure that solutions actually come about. I mean, this is not just the role of the government. The role of the government is to be a catalyst, to be an enabler, to be a facilitator, but it's also the private sector that needs to actually put their best foot forward and actually ensure that these corridors become a reality in our lifetime.
Thank you very much. Next question. Please, short question and short answers. Thank you.
I am Alireza Mir Yousefi from Iranian Foreign Minister. I have two short questions on IMEC. The first question is about feasibility of IMEC, because as I understand, the backbone of IMEC is railroad, east-west railroad in Saudi Arabia, that it is on the plan from 1910 for more than 100 years. How it is feasible to complete this railroad, how much the budget it needs, and when you think it will be completed. The second question is on the exact route of IMEC, because last year in G20 they said it comes from Mumbai to UAE and after that to Saudi Arabia. But in the first plan of IMEC, that it was in the website of US State Department as a part of I2U2 plan, it was a start from Oman. It comes from India to Oman and then continue in Saudi Arabia. It seems after Azdawar, there are some news that again the road of Oman is on the plan. Please explain on these two questions.
Who wants to answer?
You go on IMEC?
Should I ask the next question or would you answer?
You want me to take it? On IMEC? You want me to take it?
Rohit, do you want to answer?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, let's take several questions at a time because time is running.
So, ma'am,
who wants to answer to the Iranian?
Should I respond quickly?
Very quickly, please. Answer.
Go.
Should I? No, go ahead.
Please.
Sure. Thank you, Excellency. So,
microphone, please, yes.
IMEC, as you know, the announcement came about on the sidelines of G20 in 2023 when India was the president of the forum.
No,
and it was announced through the signing of an MOU by certain partners. India views it as something that is not obligatory in international law, unlike other corridors in the past. So from that perspective, I think the details are still being worked out. I'm not at liberty to go into specific countries and nodes at this point. But the feasibilities and the details are still being worked out. It's a work in progress. And of course, there are no obligations or compulsions at play to join or leave the project in that sense. So this is where I will leave it. And on any specific infrastructure related question, maybe I'm not the right person to take that on railroads. Maybe somebody else.
I take a last question.
Actually, the gentleman.
Ma'am, my question.
The gentleman. Sorry. Excuse me.
I'm really sorry, but we are really out of time. You can catch up with the speakers outside, but we really have to close the session. So my sincere apologies to you. A bigger round of applause to the panel, please.
Thank you, panel.
My apologies to the moderator and the speakers as well. If I could just invite you to the front of the stage for a quick photograph. And my colleagues would also like to hand over a small token of our appreciation for all of you. Thank you so much, ma'am. for the moderation, and we end the session here. We do have a short 10-minute break so that everyone can just stretch their legs a little bit. And then we reconvene in this hall for the next session. Ma'am, if I could invite all the speakers to the front of the stage for a quick photograph. That's Abla Latif, Bart De Jong, Marco Driosoto, Rizwan Sumar, and Rohit Ratish, moderated by Anna Bilt. We take a very short 10-minute break, post which we come back to this room for the next session, Black Swans at Sea. Are we prepared for the future? Thank you so much.